World War I began on the 4th of August 1914 when Britain declared war on Germany following a series of events that led to global conflict. The events: June 1914, Franz Duke Ferdinand, heir to the Austrian throne, is assassinated. 28th July, Austria-Hungary declares war on Serbia, claiming that the death of the Duke was by the hand of Serbia. Russia, Britain and France are dragged into the war as the protectors of Serbia. Germany, Italy and Turkey, the protectors of Austria-Hungary. 30th July, Britain and Russia mobilize their forces. 1st August, Germany declares war on Russia. 2nd August, Germany invades Belgium and declares war on France. 4th August, Britain declares war on Germany. The war between the Allies and the Triple Entente begins. Australia, being an ally to Britain, is dragged into the war on the side of the Allies. Much like the First World War, Australia was forced in on behalf of Britain. After Germany invaded Poland, France and Britain declared war on Germany. Due to the declaration of war by Britain towards Germany, Australia was dragged into the Second World War for almost the same reason as World War I. Almost every soldier in World War I spent most of the war in trenches, surrounded by other dead soldiers. When soldiers were first heading for the trenches, the first thing they would notice or experience, aside from the far-off bombing of artillery, would be the horrific smell of dead soldiers and the smell of high-explosive artillery strikes. The closer and deeper a soldier got within the trenches, the worse it got. The trenches themselves were not exactly comfortable. Often they filled with mud and water when it rained, causing trenches full to countless soldiers. The trenches were also infested with lice and rats that feasted on the dead corpses of many soldiers. No soldier could look over the trench without being shot down by an enemy sniper. Food was scarce and unpleasant. Water was drunk through empty fuel cans. High explosive artillery rained down almost constantly along the trench lines. Many soldiers suffered from shell shock and post-traumatic stress disorder because of this, although they were considered cowards because the mental disorder was not recognized by medicine at that time. An attack on the enemy base meant days of bombardment to weaken the enemy's fighting ability before lines of soldiers with fixed bayonets would charge over the trench in a sprint to try and reach the enemy trench without being shot down. Very little soldiers actually survived this bold run. The conditions in World War II were very different to World War I, especially with the introduction of tanks, chemical warfare, and the removal of trench warfare. There was a lot more action and fighting in World War II, and many more soldiers and civilians died. The conditions were a lot worse compared to World War I. New, improved and deadlier weapons made life a living hell for many soldiers. Experiencing the conditions in World War I would be nothing compared to seeing through the destruction and devastation of World War II. During World War I, women played a major role as nurses, fighting overseas and at home. Many women helped heal wounded soldiers in battle. The basic role for a female in the First World War was to nurse to heal soldiers. As for World War II, women gained a much larger role than in World War I. They still played a massive role as nurses, helping wounded soldiers in battle overseas, but this time round, they gained more roles. Women moved into unpaid workforces, taking over the roles of men in business and land. Jobs at home became more open for women, and women began working more than usual. As well as traditional jobs and nurses at war, women still had a large part in helping the military, although not in combat. Women at home knit balaclavas, jumpers and gloves to send to soldiers fighting overseas. They also provided entertainment for many of the soldiers at home. The Women's Estonian Nation organized women to drive and service army vehicles and planes. It also trained women in air raids and basic military drills. Women also became farmers under the Women's Land Army. Women also played a role in the armed services. Under the government of Labour Prime Minister Billy Hughes, full conscription was attempted in World War I through two plebiscites. The first plebiscite was held on the 28th of October 1916. It rejected conscription scarcely, with votes reaching 48% for and 52% against. The second plebiscite was held on the 20th of December 1917. It was defeated with more people voting against it than the first plebiscite. Both plebiscites were rejected, and there was no conscription law in World War I. This meant that Australian soldiers had to rely on volunteers for support until the end of the war. In 1939, at the beginning of World War II, all unarmed men aged 21 and living in Australia were called upon for 3 months of militia training. These men only had to serve in Australia and its territories. Following the conscription in 1939 was another conscription, which was effectively introduced in mid-1942. This claimed that all men aged 18 to 35 and single men between the ages of 35 to 45 were required to join the citizens' military forces. Volunteers with the Australian Army labelled the CMFs as chocolate soldiers or chocos, as they were believed to melt under the conditions of battle.